What really killed the Roman Empire? You know, for centuries, this has been one of history's absolute greatest questions. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into a pretty provocative argument that the real killer isn't who you think.
I mean, this question is just legendary, isn't it? What could possibly bring down a power that ruled the entire known world for centuries? It seems almost impossible.
So, you've probably heard all the usual suspects, right? You've got the barbarian hordes crashing through the gates, a total revolving door of unstable emperors. There are even these wild theories about lead poisoning from the pipes. But what if the real killer wasn't some outside force at all, but something internal? What if Rome's collapse was this slow, self-inflicted wound caused by its own government's economic policies? To really get how that could happen, we can't start with the fall. We have to start with the glory days.
Yeah, to understand the rot, you first have to see the riches. So let's start at the absolute peak of the Roman Empire. We're talking about a golden age of what seemed like endless prosperity, and it was all built on a foundation of economic freedom.
Okay, so after decades of just brutal civil war, the victory of Augustus at the Battle of Actium kicks off the famous Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And for the first time in generations, the entire Mediterranean was basically one single peaceful marketplace. And as you can imagine, trade just exploded. Wealth flowed through the empire like never before.
Now, what's really fascinating here is just how modern these policies sound. Augustus was a huge champion of private property and private business. He set up free trade across this massive empire, and get this, with customs duties as low as 5%. The money was solid silver and gold, so it was reliable, and crucially, he got rid of the super corrupt system of tax farming and replaced it with regular, predictable taxes. People knew exactly what they owed, and any money they earned on top of that was theirs. This created this huge incentive for everybody to work hard, to invest, and to train.
But of course, this golden age couldn't last forever. The very policies that built all of Rome's wealth, they started to get chipped away, slowly at first, and then with absolutely devastating speed.
A big part of the problem was just geography. After Emperor Trajan's reign around 117 AD, the empire basically hit its maximum size. The age of conquest was over, and that meant no more new lands to loot for treasure, no more new provinces to squeeze for tribute to fill the government's bank accounts. All of a sudden, the government had to pay for its huge army and all its bureaucrats entirely from taxes on its own people. The easy money was gone.
So what does a government do when it's running out of money but doesn't want to just raise taxes on everyone? Well, it turns to a trick that's as old as money itself: currency debasement. It's simple, really. They'd melt down the old silver coins, mix in cheaper metals like copper, and then mint a bunch of new coins that looked the same but were actually worth way, way less. This is inflation. It's a hidden tax on every single person who uses the money.
And we're not talking about a minor adjustment here. What happened next was one of the most incredible currency collapses in all of history. It started small, but it spiraled into total chaos. It all started pretty small, actually. Emperor Nero, who needed cash for his, let's say, lavish lifestyle and a growing army, he just slightly reduced the silver in the main coin, the denarius, from nearly pure down to about 90%. Honestly, most people probably didn't even notice. Okay, now fast forward about a century. Under Marcus Aurelius, the constant pressure of wars on the frontier forced the government to do it again and again. The denarius was now down to only 75% silver. You can see the trend is really starting to pick up speed. By the middle of the 3rd century, wow, the floodgates just opened. You had decades of chaos and civil war, which meant emperors were just minting money as fast as they possibly could to pay their soldiers. The denarius now had only 5% silver in it. It was basically a copper coin with a thin, cheap silver wash.
And this is the final collapse. It's just staggering. By the time of Claudius Gothicus, the silver content hit an unbelievable low of just 0.02%. The official currency of the mighty Roman Empire had become completely and utterly worthless.
So what does this actually mean for the average person? Well, when the money in your pocket is worthless, prices just explode. A measure of wheat in Egypt that cost maybe 7 or 8 drachmas in the 2nd century, by the end of the 3rd century, it cost 120,000. That's an inflation rate of 15,000%. The entire money economy had just completely broken down.
This economic chaos, as you can imagine, created a huge crisis for the government. Since it couldn't buy what it needed anymore, it turned to a new and pretty terrifying tool: pure force. The era of economic freedom was officially over.
So in 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian decided he was going to fix this whole inflation problem by sheer force of will. He issued something called the Edict on Maximum Prices. It was a law that set a legal price ceiling on everything, from grain and beef to wages and shipping costs. And the penalty for charging more than the legal price? Not a fine, death.
So how did that work out? It was a total, complete disaster. A writer from the time, Lactantius, he tells us exactly what happened. With no profit to be made, farmers and merchants just stopped bringing their stuff to the market. This made shortages even worse, and black markets popped up everywhere. The law caused so much chaos and bloodshed that in the end, they just had to give up on it.
And this failure trapped the Roman state in a death spiral. With money being worthless, the government started demanding taxes in the form of actual goods, grain, leather, whatever had value. But the tax rates were so crippling that farmers started abandoning their land, and craftsmen started hiding their wealth. So, of course, tax revenues plummeted. And how did the state respond? With more force, which just choked the very economy it was trying to bleed dry.
The end result of all this was a system that looked a whole lot like feudalism. The state essentially froze society in place. Farmers were legally bound to their land. Ship owners were bound to their ships. Soldiers were soldiers for life. And guess what? Their sons were legally required to become soldiers too. Any kind of economic mobility, any kind of freedom, it was just gone.
And this brings us to the final and most shocking argument from the source material, that for many ordinary Romans, the final collapse of the empire, it wasn't a tragedy, it was a relief. In the 50 years after Diocletian's reforms, the tax burden on Roman citizens basically doubled. So, for a small farmer, the state's demands just became impossible to meet. You were working all year just to survive, and then hand over pretty much everything you made to the tax collector.
What do you do in a situation like that? I mean, you look for any escape you can find. People just abandoned their land. Others gave up their freedom entirely, signing on to work for powerful landlords who could maybe protect them from the brutal tax collectors. They literally chose servitude over citizenship.
And this is the real gut punch. The state had become so oppressive, so extractive, that when the barbarians finally started crossing the frontiers, many citizens didn't see them as invaders. They saw them as liberators. The Roman government, not the Goths or the Vandals, had become the real enemy. So, the story of Rome's fall, when you look at it through this economic lens, it becomes this powerful cautionary tale. It forces us to ask a timeless question, really, about the balance between the power of the state and the freedom of the individual. And that's a question that was just as relevant in the 4th century as it is today.